Welcome back, and we're going to continue with the creation of this part here, and this time we're going to do it in AutoCAD 3D. Alright, so the way that I like to do things, and I know you've probably seen this in the last video, I like to create shapes and then take it away from the overall shape. So what I'm planning on doing here is to create this shape here, and excuse my drawing, I know it's a little bit bad here, but kind of freehanding on a computer. So I'm going to create this shape. I'm also going to include this cutout here since it goes right through the bottom. And that's my goal, is to create this shape, and then I'm going to use two other shapes, which my second shape will be this rectangle here, and one more shape here, which is a rectangle located above here. Okay? So if you can kind of stay with me and hopefully you can understand what I'm thinking on this, is that with those three shapes, I should be able to create this part rather quickly. So let's jump on over to AutoCAD and get started on this. So back in AutoCAD, a few things I want to do is I can go ahead and switch over to the 3D portion of it, or set AutoCAD up to do 3D, or I can create my parts here in 2D and then do it later. Whichever method, to me, it really doesn't matter. I just always take in consideration that I'm creating things on the top view. Alright, so I'm just going to start off and create them here, and then we'll switch over to the 3D. So this will be a little different than what I did last time. Let's go ahead and turn the grid off. And then we can use our ortho on, since most of these parts, well, actually all of the pieces on here are going to be rectangular, or on a 90 degrees. Alright, let's start with the line. Now I'll click here. I'm going to go this direction, 30. And if it goes off your screen, just hit escape. Then you can zoom out, and then come back to the line command. And then click on this endpoint. And let's go down the distance of 35. Let's come back here to the right, 12. Let's go up 10. Back this direction, 50. Let's go down 10. To the right, 12. Let's go all the way up on the back half here, 80. Kind of come down a little bit here, 44, this direction. And then I can come and click on this pinpoint and then hit escape. So this is that overall first shape that I told you that I was going to create and extrude going through. Next, I switch over and get the dimensions for the other shape. So all of the dimensions for this outside shape were really self-explanatory. This inside one is going to be exactly the same way. So we're going to have this 75 is going to be the number that I'm going to use, which is going to give me that length. Right? So that's the length of my rectangle, and then the width of my rectangle is hiding here. So those are going to be the two dimensions that I'm going to use to create that rectangle. And likewise here at the top, I have another 75 as my length, and in this case it's going to be 24. So those are going to be the two numbers I'm going to use on that one to create my other rectangle. Now just kind of keep in mind, these rectangles are going to be very similar to each other, so make sure you keep kind of a mental note of where they are. Alright, so jumping back to AutoCAD. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the first rectangle. And I'll just use the rectangle command. Click here. Actually, I'm not in the rectangle command. Let's go to the rectangle. There we go. I'll click here, and I'll type in 75, comma, 30. Let's go ahead and create another rectangle. I'll create a rectangle here, click here, and this is going to be 75, comma, 24. So those are the two rectangles that I'm going to use to kind of subtract from my overall part. Now, keep in mind that when I switch over to the 3D portion, there are some primitive ones, and I might just show you that. So I'll give you both options here. Alright, so let's go ahead and switch AutoCAD over to the 3D portion. I like to start off by selecting this little sprocket here at the bottom, click the fly up, and go to 3D modeling. And then while it's doing this thing, you just give it a little time for the ribbon to change and to convert everything over. Alright, next I'm going to go ahead and close this. And what I mean by there are some primitive commands that are already set for you is that over here underneath the box, you have some commands that you can use. And in our case, I can use the box command to create these. And I will show you that on this one. So I'm going to give you both options on here just to show that to you. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to switch out of the 2D wireframe. And so long as I'm in anything else, I'll get to use my gizmos. So let's switch out of the 2D wireframe and take a look into just a regular wireframe. Next, I always kind of put my picture here in an isometric. That way I can keep track of which way is the front. So I can see that I need to stand this up and then I need to spin it to get this orientated to the right direction. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the rotate gizmo. I'm going to highlight this shape. Then I'm going to make sure I join this first. So I'm going to highlight it first, type in J, enter. I always check here on the command line to make sure that it says one polyline. Now when I select this one, I'll select this red axis. Once again, my ortho is on, so once I see the shape standing up, I'm just going to left click here. And then I'll select the blue axis, which is here. And then you're going to see I'm going to come this direction. And I'll left click here. So now that is correctly orientated. Alright, let's go ahead and use the extrude command. I'll select excuse me, this part that I just created. Enter. And then I need to give it a path or the length of that path. And in our case, it's going to be 125. Alright, so if I change this out of wireframe, you can actually see that shape a little bit better. Let's take a look at it in shades of gray. And now you can actually see that I've created that part. Now these two are just going to be extrusions, right? So I already figured out the length and the width. Let's jump back to the PDF to see what the height of each one of those will be. Okay, so the height on this rectangle here has to be at least 35. So I'm telling you at least. It can be greater than 35 in this case, and it will work totally fine for you. This one up here at the top has to be exactly 30, because it's going down a specific distance. This one here, as long as it goes through, it'll take that distance with no problem. Okay, so I'll go ahead and do the extrusion on these. But first, what I like to do is typically place this in the right orientation or in the right location. So I'm just going to use a regular move command. Select my shape here. Enter. And I want to go from this midpoint, and I'm going to move it to that midpoint. Now sometimes this might be hard for you to select, and if that's the case, you can always switch back to a wireframe view. So if I select there and select wireframe, it'll make it a lot easier when I extrude that line there. So it's a lot easier to select. Once I have it selected, I'll go ahead and hit the enter button, and then it has to be at least 35. So long as it goes through the part, that'll be fine. So I'm just going to select all the way down here. And you can see that number is greater than the 35. Once I select here, I'm going to use the subtract command. So I'm going to subtract, select the object I want to keep first. That's going to be this one. Enter. And then I want to select the object that I want to get rid of, which in this case is going to be our shape that we just created. So I'll select that. And when I hit enter, that part should subtract away from here. And now if I take a look at this in shades of gray, let's go ahead and take a look and see how this looks. And that looks exactly like what I was trying to create. Alright, so I can do the exact same thing with this rectangle here. I can go ahead and place it at that midpoint, and then I can extrude it. But I'm going to show you how to use the primitive way of doing this. So some of these are automatic commands, and I'm going to use the box in this case. I'm going to select here. And this thing still is going to behave just like an X and Y. So the same X and the same Y that I used before is what I'm going to use. So I'm going to type in 75, comma, 24, enter, and then I have to give it the height. In this case, it doesn't matter which direction I go to this height. as long as I point and tell it that the length of this is 30. Okay? So these two are the exact same command as I was creating this rectangle and extruding it, or I can do it all in one shot. Let's go ahead and move this. I'm going to select this box, click that midpoint, and then I'm going to place it at that midpoint. Once again, if it gets hard for you to select in between these two, I always recommend that you switch to a wireframe view. And then when I choose the subtract option, I'm going to select the outside part because that's the part I want to keep. Enter. And then I'm going to select that box and then hit enter. Alright? If I switch back to shades of gray, you're going to see that that should appear, and that should look exactly like the shape that we was trying to create. Let's go ahead and delete this. Like I did last time, I'm just trying to get you familiar with jumping over to the 2D portion, just so I can show you that all of these views are rather quickly created. So what I'm going to do is jump to the Layout tab. I'm going to delete the viewport here. And then I'm going to go up to the Layout tab. I'm going to select the word Base. Then I'm going to select from Model Space. And I have to give it a little second for it to kind of warm up, and this is where you kind of got to be patient with it. And this also depends on how much stuff you have open and how large is that file that's going on behind it. But eventually it's going to start following your cursor around. Remember that it's going to start off with the top view. You can change the view of the orientation of it. So if I select orientation on my command line and say, hey, I want to start with the front view, and I think it started with it by default. I'm sorry, I misspoke. So here's the front view. So I'm going to left click here, hit the enter button on my keyboard, and then I'm going to come and place this top one here. So left click here, then I'm going to left click here, and then finally I will left click here. And after I got them all the views that I want, be careful not to keep left clicking. Just hit the enter button and it will put in all of those shapes for you. Okay? And then, like I said, the last thing I can do here is I can select this view, choose Edit View, and then when the ribbon changes up here, instead of using the hidden lines, you can use Shade It with Visible Lines. And then I'll hit the exit button there. Okay? So, real simple to do and create all of those views, and you get all of your hidden lines and things of that nature. Alright, so I hope you enjoyed this one, and stay tuned for the next one. I got a lot more of these videos coming, and the next time that I create this shape, I'm going to do it in Inventor, so stay tuned for that. Thank you for watching, and if you're enjoying this, please like and subscribe.